if you're not dealing with denial and seeing things clearly, you're making a bad situation better, and it's really worse than you think, and it needs attention and it needs focus.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women, where we talk about challenges senior female leaders face in being happy and successful at work. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah E. Brown. My guest today is Dr. Jane Greer. She is a marriage and family therapist, a psychotherapist, author, radio host, and creator of Shrink Wrap, the popular commentary on what we can learn from the trials and triumphs of not only celebrity, but all relationships. Through her media collaborations and professional insights, Dr. Greer is recognized as a leading national expert in love and relationships. She's the author of 6 books, including the one we're going to be referencing today, Am I Lying to Myself? Jane, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So give me some examples of what denial in the workplace might look like in terms of denying our needs, for example.
Well, it starts with denying our needs in terms of the hours we work, workload we take on, how much responsibility we handle in terms of our own job, and then taking on assignments, workloads of other people, and negating our needs, denying that it's important for us to leave at 6 o'clock to go home for dinner, to be there with our children, that this report has to be in by the morning. It's more important. And so denial is easy to say, well, it's just what we tell ourselves is it's just for now. It'll get better. It's just this project. Also, denial comes up into place in terms of colleagues and bosses, how they interact with you. What I see is a lot of times colleagues will confiscate ideas or cut somebody out of the meeting, overtalk them, interrupt them. And we tell ourselves, well, they didn't mean it, they didn't realize it, or I wasn't making a good point. What they have to say is more important. So that's some of the ways in which you can see denial raise its head in the workplace.
And I can see how we're lying to ourselves. So just out of curiosity, do you know if this is more prevalent in women than it is in men?
I think it's pretty balanced because everybody in a work organization has to deal with competitive colleagues, demanding bosses, difficult hours, expectations from bosses and colleagues to what I call demanders denial, to meet their demands. And I don't think it matters whether you're male or female, because the demand for performance is a constant, and it's there for both men and women. I deal with all my men that I work with, and I deal with it with all the women that I work with.
Well, just out of curiosity, so if denial is the same, do we lie to ourselves the same way? Or do we lie to ourselves differently?
Everybody lies to themselves in the same way. There are certain components of denial, what I call wishing and hoping, where we focus on how we would like things to be. We're wishing and hoping that the job improves. We're wishing and hoping that our boss notices that we're putting in these long hours and comes and says, you know what, you've been really working hard and you've done a great job. Why don't you go home tonight? And so the wishing and hoping doesn't matter if you're male or female. The wishing and hoping can go on if the boss got angry and blew up at you in the office and you go home and you're thinking, well, I hope tomorrow he'll be in a better mood. Tomorrow he'll appreciate and see that I've really worked hard this month and be positive. And so wishing and hoping is a very core component of denial for men and women.
Okay, I see that. So you talk about watch out signals or warning signals in your book around relationships. Are there warning signals in the workplace that we could be attentive to actually alert us that we're lying to ourselves?
Yeah, well, when we talk about lying to ourselves, that's denial trying to make the situation better, trying to telling ourselves it could be worse. It's not so bad. And the reality is it's worse than you think. If you're not dealing with denial and seeing things clearly, you're making a bad situation better, and it's really worse than you think. And it needs attention and it needs focus. And so watch out signs begin when you start to see people making demands, expecting performance, expecting you to stay late, to not complain, to come in early, to just do the report that they tell you, if they throw something at you at the last minute, except they're coming in and out of your office without knocking, or expecting you to leave your door open all day and just bombarding you with their needs when they come. The watch out signs are when somebody else's needs, a colleague or a boss's needs, start to overwhelm and bombard you, and your needs start to get eclipsed. And when that starts to happen, pay attention to the way you talk to yourself, because that's when you go into denial.
Okay, that makes sense. So the gist of it is we have to become aware of when other people's needs are taking priority over our own. Exactly. Without setting correct boundaries.
Well said.
But it also means we've got to be very clear about what our own needs are. And I have found that particularly among women in the workplace, they don't always know what those needs are.
That's very, very true. I think what happens with a lot of women in the workplace is they come into it in the same way they deal with friends and family, being empathic, caring, overextending, trying to be helpful, doing more than they really realistically can do. And as a result, winding up depleted and not even realizing that they're being taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And thinking that if they listen to the colleague's problem, that person will help them out in a jam. That person will just go away feeling better and relieved, and you'll still have 3 hours worth of work to contend with. Mm-hmm. And so one of the distinctions between men and women in the workplace is that men do have clarity that it's just business. They're doing business, and they're not letting their emotions and desire to help, look out for, take care of the people around them interfere. Mm-hmm. And so women's denial comes into play around looking out for and taking care of other colleagues and people on the job ahead of themselves.
Ahead of themselves, right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you also talk in your book about dealing with the denial of others when other people are denying what's going on. Tell us a little bit about how that manifests, how I can see it, what I should do about it, how do I deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is one of the hardest nuts to crack. I tell you, a chunk of my career is devoted with my patients to helping them deal with their denial around a significant other's denial, be it a parent, a husband, a wife, child, or colleague or boss. What this really entails is that people have expectations of you. And without having clarity in terms of what your own expectations are, you attempt to meet those expectations. I had a patient one time, she was working until 11 o'clock at night because the expectation of her boss, who was single, was that she would stay late and just keep working and working and working. So the denial was the demand. That was the demand. And her boss could not see that she needed to go home at 10, 9, 7 o'clock for dinner. She couldn't see it because she was so devoted and her job was her life. So her boss was in complete denial. And my patient was expecting the boss to recognize how unfair, how unreasonable her expectations were. This demander's denial, that I call it, that her demands were not a part of her job description. And she couldn't see that her boss was not going to see it. Mm-hmm. The only way she was going to make headway, she had to recognize her boss's denial. She had to see the demander's denial. They feel entitled. And they will just have you keep jumping through hoops to prove you're a good son, a good daughter, a good employee. And it took a very long time to finally get her to see that she was lying to herself, see through her own denial, see her boss's denial. I encouraged her to go read her job manual, the job description. I said, you tell me if in your job description it says you're supposed to work 15 hours a day, that you're supposed to stay till 11 o'clock and skip dinner. If it's in there, okay. But if it's not, then you're not working according to your job description. And that's what you need to address with your boss. And she did.
Did
Yes.
she? Okay.
I mean, I was knocking on her head for a couple of months there because it was just so unfair. But this kind of demandless denial in the workplace, it goes on everywhere. And people just go down the rabbit hole in terms of trying to get the other person to see that their expectations of you, their demands of you are not fair. They're unrealistic. And more importantly, these are people that do a lot, work hard, are always giving and extending, whether it's on the job or in the family, to a significant other. And the person that they're trying to devote all their energy to doesn't see it. So they're constantly trying to get them to recognize and acknowledge and see their needs, approve in order to validate their needs. And it will never happen. That's what people have to recognize.
Okay. So once you recognize it, then do you just confront it? I don't mean antagonistically, but I mean, do you just go and start addressing your own needs as the way, or is there anything else you need to do to deal with the fact that, say, for example, your boss is denying something?
Yeah, here's the deal. Great question. And I love the word confront, because what you don't do is confront the other person. That's continuing to invest in getting them to see what you're saying and not getting through demandless denial. Okay. When you see the denial, you change the way you handle yourself. You start to set boundaries, you start to put limits in place, and you need to learn to tolerate and expect that the other person may be angry, may get upset, may have a reaction. They're not necessarily going to like it, but that's okay. You need to take care of yourself because they are not going to take care of you. It's just that simple. They'll take care of you if your needs don't interfere with their needs. If you want 2 days off and there's nothing on the calendar, okay, fine. But if they need you to be there to do something, or they want you to stay late because they need to go somewhere and you're going to pick up the slack, forget it.
Got it. Okay. All right. So being sensitive to that and then dealing with it in a very proactive but respectful way is what you're suggesting. Hi, this is Sarah Brown again, the host of the KTS Success Factor podcast for women. I hope you are enjoying this episode and gaining some tips and inspiration on how you can be happier, more successful, and experience less stress at work. If you would like to learn more about how you can take control of your career and do it your way, visit sarahebrown.com. There you will be able to download a free chapter from my book, Let Your Personality Be Your Career Guide. It contains information and exercises on how you can identify your unique interests, strengths, and needs, and translate that into career goals that are just right for you. Now back to this informative episode.
Putting your checks and balances into play. You know, I have so many people, whether it's a parent who wants a phone call twice a day, every day, once a week, once a month, it doesn't matter. No matter how much you call, they'll always say, well, why didn't you call now? Or why can't you call more? Or why are you calling me now? And I say to people, you need to figure out what it means to you to have your clarity. What do you need to do to feel that you're being a good employee on the job, a good son, a good daughter? And that's what you do, because then you'll be able to handle the other person's angry reaction and disappointment. And eventually they come to respect that they can't just walk all over you.
Mm-hmm.
They can't do the Mexican hat dance on your head all the time.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk in the book about stay stuck complainers, what are you referring to, and what would be an example of that in the workplace?
The stay stuck complainer, everybody knows one or has one in their life. That's the person who's always complaining about something wrong in their life, something they're unhappy about. So at work, it's going to be the person who's complaining about the work project, the boss isn't being nice to them, they're not being included in meetings, they're not being acknowledged in meetings, one of their colleagues is interrupting them, and nobody's inviting them to lunch. They'll complain and complain and complain. And everybody wants to be helpful. We all want to help and make things better for the people we care about. So you jump in and you start to try and help them. And what you're met with is, yes, but everything you offer, every suggestion, every piece of advice is rejected. I tried that. It didn't work. It's not going to work. I can't do that. I don't know. I'm afraid that I don't know how to go about that. And you come away exhausted and depleted, and they're happy as a lark because they vented. The stay stuck complainer wants to complain. They are not going to do anything. If it's a family member, you might have somebody who's always complaining that they're so depressed. They're so depressed. They don't have the energy to go do this. I'm so lonely. I'm so bored. If it's an older parent, your mother's making me miserable. Your father's upsetting me. Your brother's doing this. I can't, I don't have the time for this. They'll complain about any and everything and will do nothing to change it. If you suggest, well, why don't you talk to him? No, that won't work. Why don't you see a doctor? Maybe talk to somebody, maybe to help to talk and get it. No, that won't work. Maybe an antidepressant. No, I'm not taking medication. They are stuck. They're not going anywhere. And the hardest piece of it is that they want a big chunk of your attention and time and energy. So you need clarity about how much time you're going to give them, because I have people who say to me, I get on the phone with a friend, a family member, I'm on for an hour and a half. I'm in the middle of cooking dinner and I'm listening to her. Somebody was saying to me the other day, I'm trying to make dinner. My friend calls, she's having a crisis. She's in a relationship. The guy didn't show up, and she's going on and on and on. And I said, well, did you hang up? She said, no, how could I hang up? I said, well, you're dealing with a stay stuck complainer. How long has she been in this relationship? Oh, about 2 years. I said, well, you're not going to solve that in an hour conversation in the middle of your dinner. But she's going to feel better when she hangs up because she vented, got her frustration and distress off her chest. And you're going to be aggravated at the frustration and helplessness that she just poured on you. That's a stay stuck complainer.
Got it. And so I guess the antidote is set boundaries, huh?
Yeah, setting the boundaries is tricky because it means you've got to be clear how much you're going to listen. And what I tell people to do, and it works, is I say, give them permission to complain ahead of time. Tell them they got 20 minutes to complain on your phone call. And in 20 minutes, you say, all right, time's up. I'm hanging up. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll talk to you next week. I hear what's going on, and take care. So you can do that by by letting them know, go ahead, complain, bring it on. The other thing is to say in advance, look, I have half an hour or 15 minutes, whatever you are able to give them. So I just want to give you the heads up. After 15 minutes, I'm going to have to hang up. Now, here's the important piece. After 15 minutes, when you say, oh, you know what, it's 15 minutes, I got to go. They're not going to say, oh, okay, bye. They're just going to keep talking and talking. You cannot wait for their permission or approval to hang up. You have to say, I've got to go. And you hang up while they're talking. They will get the message. I had somebody who came in and said to me they were out with their brother-in-law at dinner. And the brother-in-law is a stay stuck complainer. And every time he and the wife would go to dinner with him, it was just all the problems. He didn't have enough money, he couldn't pay his bill, the boss was mean, on and on and on, and a litany and a catalog of all his woes. So finally they said, well, dinner's over, the check came, we have to leave. And he's talking and talking. So the husband, she tells me, the husband literally puts his feet up on the table to go, we've got to go. And this guy kept talking. I said, so what'd you do? She said, well, finally, we just got up. There was no cue. There was no cue to stop him from talking. You've got to just leave, hang up, get up, walk out.
Interesting. Well, actually, I think you're probably right that that's about all you can do. And do they eventually get the message?
Well, they come to respect it. They don't get the message whereby they self-limit or talk less, but they come to finally hang up when you say, I've got to go. They will hang up. A little bit, instead of a half an hour, maybe 3 or 4 minutes of going on, but okay, have a good week. All right, I'll talk to you. All right, I'll be in touch. You get a couple of goodbyes, but you hang up. Mm-hmm. It's not the relaunch of a whole new problem, because that's what happens. You say, all right, I've got to go. And they go, oh, but what am I going to do about so-and-so? She told me this and that. And they've launched a whole new question and a whole new problem. And you're on the hook again.
I've had that happen to me, by the way. So it's very good advice to just hang up.
Thank you.
Very good.
It is not easy because everybody wants the other person to say, okay, that we want to be understood. Mm-hmm. We want the other person to understand our needs and to see us and to say, oh, okay, I've been talking to you for an hour. I get it. You got to go. Not
going to happen. It ain't going to happen with a stay stuck complainer. I get
not
that.
At all. Not in the least.
Yeah. So, Jane, one of the things that struck me as I was reading your book, and particularly thinking about denial in the workplace, but more importantly, denying other people's denial, is I wondered about the implications for whistleblowing and how much we might really be observing. Illegal activity is one thing, but really unethical activity is another thing, even if it doesn't quite meet the criteria for illegality. Is that playing a big role in terms of just glossing things over and not dealing with it? Is it?
Absolutely. Look, denial is how we avoid pain, difficulties, unpleasantries, and, in the worst case scenario, death, loss, trauma. We say that can't be. That's no way. That couldn't happen. It's not real. It can't happen. We do it with small things. People see traffic signs and go, nah, that was an hour ago. It cleared up and drive right into traffic. Or you hear it's going to rain and you look at it and you go, no, it looks fine now, because we don't want to be bothered being put out, going out of our way. So whistleblowing, not only are you going to be put out and going out of your way, but you may put yourself out of a job. Correct. Because you'll put yourself into potential harm's way where
Correct.
People
there's a high price to play for high price to play for blowing the whistle. I get it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So denial is a way to, one of the other components that I talk about is we take a little and turn it into a lot, and we take a lot and turn it into a little. So if there's a lot of bad behavior going on, we minimize it, we negate it. Oh, I'm imagining it. No, that didn't happen. Oh, it only happened one time. And we make it disappear. And that's how we live with things that are difficult to tolerate.
I can see going from a lot to a little and say this one time thing, I'm going to just ignore it now, particularly if it's going to risk, if my job's going to be at risk.
Absolutely. Right. The little into the lot is what I see a lot in relationships, in a relationship where there's needs not being met, deprivation, unhappiness. You get a little and you make that work, and you stay in wishing and hoping, or they'll tell you, we'll do this. I'll spend more time with you. So you believe what you're told when it's not going to happen, and you take a little and you make it more than it is. But these are the different sort of components of denial that we all flood ourselves with.
If you were going to give us one tip to keep in mind to talk back to denial in ourselves or in others with clarity and strength, what would that be?
Trust your gut. Seeing is believing. If you're seeing it, believe it. Write it down. I have a couple of skills called do the emotional math, which means put down on paper what you're seeing so that it's not a happening, but the happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a happening one or two times. It's the happening. It's what happens in the relationship all the time. And you're in denial if you're thinking it's just a little bit, it's just one time. So really trust your gut. Don't doubt yourself. Take your doubts seriously. Your doubts are watch out signs and cues that something's wrong, something's off. Missing the signs is another component of denial. When you doubt yourself and say, oh, I'm making too much of it, when you give somebody the benefit of the doubt at your own expense,
Mm-hmm.
you lose touch with your gut. Trust your gut.
I get that. And for people that are wondering about their gut, I'm one that it's often hard for me to trust my gut. I like the idea of writing it down, because if you write it down today and you write it down again on Friday and then again Thursday of next week, it's going to be harder to deny that it's actually happening.
Well said. And here's the thing. Here's another piece of denial. The biggest core of denial is surprise, because we forget. Denial enables us to forget. And so if somebody's living with an alcoholic who says on Friday, I'm going to stop drinking, there's a big, an episode and I'm going to stop, I promise. Okay, fine. And life goes back to basics. By Monday, you've forgotten. And so everybody who's in denial, when the behavior happens again, they're surprised. It's as if it's the first time. So when you write it down, it's not a happening. It's the happening. You see it all over the place. I also have a skill called thread the needle. And that means, again, write down what you're hearing somebody telling you they're going to do and what you're seeing them doing, so that you're not just floating on empty promises and lip service to what's going to happen. You see they did it or they didn't do it. And that brings you out of denial. Coming out of denial is seeing the reality. We stay in denial in order to feel safe and secure, but it's a big price.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. And that would work in the workplace and at home.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Mm-hmm. Jane, what questions should I have asked you that I didn't, that would help our listeners really come to terms with and understand denial in the workplace primarily?
Yeah, well, so I talk about the going nowhere relationship in terms of knowing who you're dating and that the relationship is going to be stuck. It's not going to evolve into the happily ever after that you're hoping for. And I think that's true for many people with their jobs as well, that they get into a job, they're unhappy, they start to make excuses, i.e. denial. It'll get better. I'm making so much money. How could I leave? The boss needs me. All these variations of why they can't really take the next step. And so the going nowhere relationship can be the going nowhere job. And I think it's important to take inventory, look at the watch out signs. Are you overinvested? Are you depleted? Are you extended too much? Are you dealing with demander's denial around you? What's happening? And how much are you tolerating? And at what price to your own emotional well-being? And if you're in a go nowhere job, maybe it's time to put a feeler out and see about changing jobs and see what choices and options you have.
Well said. Jane, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women. If you like what you are hearing, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. And if you would like more information on how we can help women in your organization to thrive, then go to www.sarahebrown.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, read show notes and learn more about our podcast guests, read my blog, browse through the books, or contact us for a chat. Goodbye for now.